have that public service interpreting so that users and egalitarian access to legal, health, and education and other services. Now, when we look at the effects of the language barrier in healthcare, we would see from Albon, J, and McKinney that it leads to in poorer healthcare processes and outcomes. Patients who do not speak the same language as their healthcare providers. See later that even the healthcare providers say that it does impact the quality of healthcare and also increases the risk of medical errors that can lead to serious consequences. This risk can be reduced or eliminated when physicians use professional interpreters or communicate proficient, but already it's difficult communicating. And then to add to that a linguistic barrier, that it brings an added level of difficulty in communication. Now, when we look at the use of public service interpreters in the healthcare process, we see again that from Albon and McKinney that clinicians underuse appropriate interpreters and use their language limitation impacts communication and care. So as I mentioned before, when we look at the Ghana Health Service and the Ministry of Health, the only place where you would see language being referred to is in the Code of Conduct of Healthcare Practitioners. And there they are asked to just communicate in the language public service interpreting in Ghana. First of all, it's not professionalized in public service interpreting currently. What we have is a training in conference interpreting, and I'm sure that those of us who are in the industry know that there's a difference when it comes to the training of these two aspects of interpreting. And so as a result, there is a lack of professionalization. Again, recognition is an issue. So far, we've noted that a lot of public service sectors do not seem to prioritize public service interpreters. There are no language policies or interpretation strategies in the public service. See that is at best they service. There's no officially recognized body or code of ethics. There's nobody to monitor and their only requirements with regards to language is that you can speak it or you can even with the batch, which shows that be the conduct not to discriminate. They are not, and even though there was a Ghana National Healthcare Quality Strategy document developed in 2016, it's placed emphasis on the training of healthcare workers in sign language, but not in interpretation or in interpreting other languages.
So I'm going to continue from where Ms. Amwa Pamela left off. So let me come back a bit to the Ghana, the court interpreters advert. I found it much more interesting because it listed languages by region, and some of our regions are actually so for the purposes of as the example of a minority language, because we know that between 2019 looked mainly at Kolebu Teaching Hospital and actually host people who come from across the sub-region, and it's really receives this care that cannot be offered by the others. All right, so we collected the data between August and January 2018-2019 hospital, PTE. So we have the St. Martin de Porres Hospital in Ekwe, which is very close to the Ivorian border. And then St. Teresa's Hospital, which is close to the Burkina border. And then we have the Blau, so between Ghana and Togo. And then we have the health at the two borders, and then smaller health centers in the border towns. One interesting anecdote about the Nandom is that, I mean, Hamile is the border town that leads to Nafaso. And it's based Hamile, Ghana. And then when you cross, you enter Hamile, Burkina. So it's based on local people who cross from other Francophone countries who may not have shared border languages. For example, so we targeted about 15 from each border, each healthcare facility the main ones, and we actually met that target. 10 patients at healthcare facilities. It was more difficult getting the patients, either because you go and you are told, oh, they were just discharged, or they are together learning English, who had not spent more than a year in Ghana and who had to access healthcare for one reason trying to interview them and realize that they probably understand some French, but when it comes to speaking, and the secretary, a records clerk who speaks some French, and they serve as interpreters. So from one of the hospitals, we had a case where we were told by the hospital administrator that we have a few staff who can speak the French, but not very well. So whenever a doctor or staff who is at surgical have difficulties, they normally fall on such staff to come and assist. And then at the Kolebu radiology department, we have an interpreter. And by interpreter, they mean bilingual secretaries. They'll say for long enough to have acquired some jargon. Then we have the Nandom case who says that we have a medical assistant who understands French, so she's always the first point of contact. Then this is one of the interpreters themselves, Togo. So you see, they call me if they can't speak any language apart from French, so I can communicate with the patient on phone for them. Even sometimes at night, they call you. They call me to other places such as the old to ask something from a patient and I wouldn't know what to say. I'll just seek their attention and ask, is there anybody here who can speak the French? Can you please come and help? And then Akwetu says, at times there are some patients or relatives in the ward, including patients who speak French, and we call them to do the interpretation. Then we have ad hoc interpreters provided. What these patients do often is that they come with someone who speaks English and this person does the interpretation. Some of these interpreters even speak Twi. Usually they come with interpreters and most of them come from Elugo. And then this was one of the patients who spoke in French. So she said, comme mon mari comprend plus d'anglais que moi, quand je suis en train de communiquer et puis je vois que je ne peux pas trop, ce que je peux, je fais. Mais je vois que je ne comprends pas trop à un certain niveau, je l'appelle et interprète pour moi. So more or less, her husband understands English. So when she's talking and she sees that she's no longer able to, she calls on him to continue and interpret for her. That qualified or untrained interpreters who are recognized by the hospital. And there's a case in Akwe specifically, and those people are called ambulances. And so they have 3 ambulances in Akwe, 1 woman and 2 men. who usually bring people from across the Olubo border. And it's like it's a recognized profession. This woman married somebody from Niger. And so she's learned the Jola, she learned Fulfulde, she speaks Akan, she speaks quite a number of languages, and she speaks some French. So what happens is that usually she does it for family and friends. And when they need to cross the border to come to Ghana to access healthcare, she's the one who leads them. All they have to do is pay for her transportation and her feeding. So they don't pay her for her services as an interpreter. And so and she says that if there's someone to the hospital, and so in this case, the woman in the dark blue is the ambulance, and the lady in the lighter blue is the clients that she has accompanied to the hospital. All right, and then we have here our results from the deck study and in general. So there's no form of public service interpreting in the country. UG runs conference interpreting, and the Department of Linguistics has assigned employees for any discipline and the ability to speak several Ghanaian languages. There's no idea or no need in or requirements for training in public service interpreting. French is not listed as a requisite language, even in regions with border towns. Now, we want to advocate that there's a need for trained PSIs. So that is important, because when you just have people stepping in to interpret, there may be challenges. So one of the health workers told us that language barrier really affects healthcare, because if the patients are not able to express themselves and you, the caregiver, you're also not able to express yourself, it affects the healthcare process. And then one of the nurses also said that we need professionally trained interpreters, because a professional will give the right explanation. If maybe a patient is trying to describe a symptom, the patient will say it in a way if there's a medical person that communicates it to your patient. And so they show here that there's a disability who is a professional in the interpreting. And then another person to their relatives, and they don't want their relative to know what is wrong with them. So when we have someone like that to interpret, the person is working here. In this case, is a professional. I think it's be more convenient. And then to save time, we always try to help. The only problem will be the time wasted on the path of the patient, because the interpreters are not always readily available. In the medical field, time is a very necessary fact. And then from Nandom, we also told that it delay. How system is very elitist. So we have people of a certain caliber going to medical school. And most of them, apart from the English language, rarely communicate in other languages, or maybe English language and their mother tongue. So that if they are posted to another place where those languages are not spoken, then it's very difficult for them. It's much easier among the nurses who speak more of the local languages with the medical doctors to say it in Dagari, then they now have to interpret into Tree or English before the medical doctor understands. So that actually makes the process even longer. And then on the instructions, it can be a problem. The doctor was saying us that he had a story where a patient was given tablets to insert, but the patient thought it was an. And so you can imagine the challenge of inserting, taking a drug orally that is supposed to be taken twice. So that is one of the issues. Then a dosage misinterpretation. But we had a case also where a pregnancy because she didn't understand the dosage, and so she took the wrong dosage. All right, so those are certain examples. What is the way forward in this? One is that we think that there should be advocacy and sensitization on the need of public service interpreting in the country. The training of, or starting of training, maybe by starting short courses. And it's one of the things I hope that as a School of Languages here, we can start, where we have short courses for the judiciary, for the medical services, so that sometimes they even have people who are already playing that role because they are health personnel who speak some French or some other language, and we can take them through some formal training. And then also trying to encourage people who already have French. There's a decoupling of language and science, which makes it almost impossible to find people who are experts in languages who are also in the science, but trying to get that integrated. And another dream is to set up a call center where PSI can 24/7 on it. So having a call center within the School of Languages where a hospital can call and say, we need an interpreter, and even be only French, but even minority local languages, and say that I have an appointment with a Francophone patient tomorrow. Can we have and then adopting video interpreting in certain situations where there's the need. And we'll just end with a few pictures from our field work, and we'll be glad to have comments, questions during the discussion session. And thank you very much.
Thank you, both presenters. You saved 2 minutes and 17 seconds on your time, and for that you will pay. Thanks for the presentation and some really interesting insights. The floor is now open for questions. You can either raise your hand. Okay, I see. Let me just.
Yes, we can.
Had a very interesting talk. I have a couple of suggestions, perhaps, that might sort of get you in touch with people who are doing similar research to you. Yeah, I can shoot the references.
That would be awesome.
But one of them is a colleague of mine who did his PA on medical interpreting in the emergency hospitals, you know, E&I, in Brussels, where, you know, it's a multilingual situation, and he's still very interested in along with, you know, people from the emergency centers and hospitals, and we've been constantly connected because nobody wants to see the important interpreting in these situations, no matter how drastic it is. But I'll send you his details and his PhD reference and other publications. Yeah, and then another thing I'd like to point out, because you're talking about a call center, which is a great idea. The language department and translation at the University of Ghent, working on developing a sort of, and they're also developing apps using you know, mobile phones to apps that will help either the the doctor or someone in the situation to interpret.
Okay. Okay.
And then what else what does it I want to point out was and it's in my haste to say everything. What was it? Oh, it slipped my mind. But there are two sources you could perhaps look at because yes, no, the third one was an experiment at a hospital in Madrid, going back I think now about 10 years ago, in which the hospital took on interpreters who went through the whole process from intake to exit. So this had a huge positive impact on the patients, where they come to the doctors. The interpreters were able to deal with small issues take, so that the whole thing didn't have to end up in the doctor's lap, if you like, during the medical issue. So these are different things that are perhaps that may be of interest to you.
Okay.
And I will send you the information,
Sure.
the references and so on. Thank you very much and every success with your research.
Would you like to respond, or you or Pamela?
I think that the feedback from him, for me, I think that the issue, I actually did a literature review and there was nothing on public service in Ghana. Google Scholar, Google, it's like it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really a very fertile field for research and advocacy. The advocacy, I know it's a bit more difficult because people don't want to push their money into it, but I'm trying to think around how we can even get students to that, I mean, after first degree for national service or something. I mean, I think that's granted. I was asking the patient, do you know what? And he asked, and the interpreter, I don't know, managed to explain. It took like 10 minutes for the person to ask the question, do you know what pneumonia is? So I'm not even sure whether something got lost in translation. Sometimes you just have to pray that the interpreter is saying the right thing. And I heard of a similar situation where the interpreter was asked to ask the patient if he was allergic to a certain medication, and the person said no. The interpreter said no, even though the patient said yes. So it was administered and it was really, really almost fatal. So I think it's something I'm passionate about pursuing, and I'm outside
organize short training courses or workshops for the non-professional interpreters in the field. I would like to suggest that in addition to the university organizing these training courses in cross-cultural communication or cross-linguistic communication, it would also be ideal to involve the health sector, the medical practitioners, would be.
Yeah.
Now coming to my two questions. My first question is about your interviewees. You talked of 60 health professionals who were interviewed. I'm just curious to know, of these 60, were they medical doctors? Were they nurses? Were they medical interpreters like the Togolese, whom I really found very, very impressive? It would be good if you give us a breakdown of these interviews. And then my final question is about the PSIs, as you call them, the medical interpreters, like the gentleman who was trained in Togo. Were you able to interview them and find out from them what their perceptions are of the role of an interpreter? How do they perceive themselves? They expect, what are their expectations of their role as medical interpreters? Because in cases, the medical interpreters are normally, as you say, personnel. Did you have medical personnel, but experts in the language? I would like to have a little more clarification on that. Thank you very much.
And we'll definitely take that into consideration. Now, concerning the question about the breakdown, yes, so we had a mix of nurses, and even we had midwives, people in various units. So we had the maternity, we had medical doctors, we had hospital administrators. Unfortunately, I don't have the breakdown the statistics immediately, but it's really a mix of health personnel that we interviewed. But then the second question about the perception of the role of interpreters, that's really the challenge, because they don't see themselves as interpreters. The bilingual secretaries in the radiology unit, who the units I speak, the average Ghanaian is multilingual. So I'm just helping my colleague out to go through the medical process, really. So it's not like a new title that I'm an interpreter. And this is people who would interpret into other Tree and Ebe as the main languages, but somebody will come who will be Kokomba or Kotokoli or another minority language from the north, and they would look amongst themselves to see if there's somebody who can interpret either into Tree or Ish. So I didn't think of the perception of the role as interpreters, of us in having a special set of questions for that. But going forward, it may be something we should look at. But they are really not seen as interpreters. They are really seen as just nurses who can speak the language. So they help us understand. So we can go through the.
And then also for the ambulance, which we discovered are in quotes ad hoc or recognized interpreters by the hospital. Even in such cases, the ambulance, those who serve as the interpreters themselves, they don't have an understanding of their role. And so we had a case where one of the ambulance actually said she had some information from the doctor which she was supposed to tell the patient, but the patient won't be able to handle it. And so she gave that information to the patient's relative. And this is a breach healthcare system. In all our interviews, most people actually did not even know that interpretation exists. In their heads, there's translators, there are bilinguals, but even the word interpreter or the concept. So that already shows that in terms of understanding or knowledge or even perception, it's very low.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. I see Paul Bandia's hand is up. Paul, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to thank both of you for this very, very enlightening presentation. It is so an important respect to into developing this aspect. The consequences, as you can see, can be grave when you don't have the right service. I mean, once a patient is confusing suppository with oral administration of drugs and confusing dosage and all the like, they can have very grave consequences. And so this kind of work it's so essential, and we can only implore our communities, or our governments, or the stakeholders, or very seriously, because it involves lives, it involves survival. I was thinking more especially about I was thinking about the case in where you mentioned that there's the border between Ghana and Burkina Faso, and the ethnicity in that community, across the border, they speak the same language. They're just split by boundaries. This is something that we know about from my perspective, coming from post-colonialist or colonialist studies perspective. These borders were so arbitrarily drawn. So you find people who speak exactly the same language from the same ethnicity on either side of the border. Now, with this kinds of possibility of language across borders and all the like, I was wondering if in this very good research that you're doing in terms of its dimension, if the cross-border collaboration is something you would consider in terms of training, in terms of administration, in terms of work. Is that a possibility to think in terms of cross collaboration, looking into working with people who are doing the same kind of work, or who would be interested in the same kind of work?
I definitely would. Yeah, we definitely would. We definitely would. One of the things we think make our work richer, and that would make research coming from Africa have a louder voice, is when it doesn't stick to one community or one country, but when we can go across and show comparisons between what is happening in our place and what is happening elsewhere. In fact, our research showed that the linguistic situation in Korle Bu was very different from the linguistic situation across the borders. Because in the Korle Bu setting, the language first. If the French is not working, if there's nobody with a shared border language, then they have to look for interpreters. So it even shows us that what happens at the borders is a bit different from what happens within a referrals facility, for example, in the middle of an urban community. So yes, we definitely will be interested in collaborating, not just with the immediate borders, but I've heard that it's a similar situation in Uganda. We can explore and see how we could put together maybe something even on language and access to health perspectives from Africa, and have various researchers and translation contribute to a paper each. I think it's really possible.
And out of just personal curiosity, because I deal with this in literary translation, how is it at all considered or significant to consider what we refer to as hybrid languages in such contexts. I don't know in terms of borders between Cameroon and Nigeria and other places where they irrespective of whether you know standard French or standard English, or irrespective of whether people can speak your own language or you pick someone to speak language. There's such possibilities of working with hybrid languages, such as those languages such as Pidgin English. Do you have those kinds of ways of that? I'm just curious.
The thing about Ghanaian Pidgin English is that it is different from Nigerian Pidgin English, even though, I mean, it's intelligible, but it is all, it would be very badly seen for me as a lady to speak Pidgin English, and I'm not sure I can carry a conversation in Pidgin English.
Okay.
And so it is really, it's not as nice or Cameroonian Pidgin English is. And for example, the Ivorians have the Nuchi, but it will be, I wouldn't understand Nuchi if it's spoken in front of me, even though I understand French. So in our border towns, at least my knowledge, we don't necessarily have those hybrid situations yet. In Ghana, what do we do have is the foreigners considered to be Ghana's national language. Some people would not speak it for ideological reasons, but I'm sure if a gun was pointed to their head, everybody would be able to produce a Macan. So that's the situation that we have. The border languages, as I said, like Hamile, they all speak Mosi, but they have slight variations, which is normal. The same as ever when you cross between Ghana and Togo. And the only of the French lies, there's so much French in the Togo Ebe. There is some level of code switching in Ghanaian Ebe as well, but not to the same extent. But I mean, they use Ebe at the border hospitals a lot. So even when they are communities like talking to pregnant women, advising them on nutrition, they are more likely to have people coming from across the border anyway.
Okay. Thank you so much. That's so enlightening.
Thank you, colleagues. I think we have reached, there are some more questions, but I think we've reached the end of our allotted time. And to be fair to the next speaker, I suggest that you put your questions maybe in an email or in the chat box. So thank you very much, Sonam and Pamela, for tickling our thinking buds, if I can put it that way. Our next speaker, and I just want to check, I think I saw her, Ms. van der Merwe, are you here? Susan van der Merwe, can you hear us? Are you going to present or should we play your recording? Okay, thanks, Luke. So, ladies and gentlemen, our next is Kanya van der Merwe from the University of Stellenbosch. She's a language practitioner and she specializes in sorry, I should probably put this on. Specializes in she also works in the community as a manager of communication at one of the NPOs. and she also works as a freelance translator. Unfortunately, we are having all kinds of electricity problems in South Africa, so she has sent a recording of a presentation which Luke will play for us. So Luke, you can go ahead with that.
Recording in progress. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kanya van der Merwe, and I'm a master's student in translation at Stellenbosch University. Thank you for the opportunity to attend and present at this conference alongside such distinguished academics. I've really enjoyed listening to the presentation so far. This presentation is roughly based on a paper I wrote during my honours course, and it's entitled Setting the Bar Behind Bars, Prisoner Interpreting in Nigeria and South Africa. I hope you enjoy it. Just to clarify some relevant terminology, a prisoner is a person who has been deprived of his freedom against his wishes and is confined due to forcible restraints and captivity. This definition of prisoner in this study includes pretrial detainees. And a pretrial detainee is an untried or unconvicted prisoner awaiting legal proceedings. Innocent until proven guilty, as they say. A prison guard is a correction officer who supervises prisoners and detainees. A prison is an institution that confines prisoners and detainees. A major or a majority language is a language with complex functions that has gained wide acceptance and application within a nation. The best example here would be English. A minor or a minority language is a language linked to power issues, usually spoken by a minority group. In cases where the majority of the population speaks a minority language, the language in question lacks power to some extent, such as some indigenous African languages. For the purpose of this study, I suggest the term prisoner interpreting as opposed to the term prison interpreting as is used in the literature, because prisoner interpreting to interpreting in prisons. It also includes interpreting in courts for pretrial detainees. Therefore, prisoner interpreting is the act of facilitating communication between a prisoner and a third party who do not. So the contents of this presentation, I will start with an introduction and the aim of my study. Afterwards, I will contextualize the community interpreting for prisoners and the prison environment. After that, I discuss communicative competence in terms of cultural differences and dialectal differences. Then it would be power dynamics, where I talk about language status and power gaps. And lastly, I look at responsibility and role, which looks at conflicting goals and challenging norms. I will end off with my conclusion and my reference list. So as an introduction, as a continent with over 2,000 indigenous languages, Africa is very complex regarding linguistic diversity. Whereas fluency in a major language is vital, it's sometimes lacking as prisoner interpreting exchanges. Interpreters are frequent between a prisoner and a third party, whether it be a lawyer, a prison guard, or a police officer. In order for these exchanges to be successful, a person with competence in both languages is requested to interpret, which poses a need for community interpreting. In this context, community interpreting is a form of mediation where social differences and power relations play an indisputable role. Only a handful of work in interpreting studies has focused on prisoner interpreting, labeling it a virtually explored territory that deserves more research attention. The nature of prisoner interpreting is inherently diverse that take place. These events include informal conversations, medical or legal consultations, admission procedures, security processes, criminal proceedings, etc. Visits in the prison can be conflictual or social, and of course, criminal proceedings leans more towards the formal side. Prisoner interpreting is performed in prisons and since court interpreting is viewed as a form of community interpreting, because court interpreters in these countries are mostly not highly trained individuals. There are studies on African countries. Community interpreting caters to members of the community. The practice of community interpreting is generally associated with interactions involving less privileged groups and less cozy settings, such as prisons and courts, because prisoners have the right to receive information in a language that they understand. The need for language brokering for prisoners often requires the use of professional interpreting services, but these services are not always feasible or available. An ad hoc or untrained or non-professional interpreter then has to come in and mediate, which is fellow prisoners, prison guards, cleaners, etc. Is performed in a very informal conversational mode, normally in short consecutive mode, where the interpreter delivers target language speech when the speaker pauses their speech or conversation, usually after a few words or sentences. Community interpreters mainly work in both language directions, requiring so-called A to B language interpreting and vice versa. This bilateral mode of interpreting is very common in Africa, where it is expected of interpreters to be fluent in both working languages, especially since the dynamic between the two can vary from a native versus a foreign language, an official versus a non-official language, or a major versus a minority language. Despite community interpreting being the most common form of interpreting, it is still an emerging profession that has not been extensively studied. To contextualize the environment, prisoner interpreting mainly occurs in prisons. The prison environment where interpreting takes place strongly affects the atmosphere and the interpreting task itself. The conditions in South African prisons have been described as horrifying and profoundly disturbing. Conditions in Nigerian prisons are described as harsh and life-threatening. This refers to healthcare services, to food provision, to sleeping arrangements, to all of those things in these prisons. Conditions in these two African prisons are suboptimal for prisoner interpreting. Taking turns to speak and allowing the interpreter to mediate before interpreting. There are not sufficient opportunities to meet in a private room due to space, quality, and quantity of the room being inadequate. Meetings thus are common areas, which results in low levels of privacy and intimacy. Poor acoustics and the loud background noise of simultaneous conversations also hinder the interpreting process. These issues relate directly or indirectly to prison overcrowding, which is a concerning issue in Nigeria and South Africa. Statistics by the International Center for Prison Studies from recent years show that these two countries have the most pretrial detainees of any African country, both just shy of 45,000. Some of these prisoners have been on remand for several years. South Africa comes out on top with the most overcrowded prisons, locking up 170,000 prisoners in facilities, not to speak of the implications interpreting exchanges. Communicative competence is considered a prerequisite for success in community interpreting. Communicative competence touches on the interpreter's ability to perform dialogically in a given language. And the most important element to consider is complete situational adequacy, since interpreting generally takes place in informal settings with a diverse array of people. Community interpreters should therefore produce culturally and situationally adequate renditions in understandable language representative of the social group being addressed. Interpreting in any setting goes far beyond focusing on the linguistic aspects of the message, which is exactly the case for prison interpreting as well, since cultural and dialectal differences are sure to arise. Knowledge of cultural differences assists the interpreter in community settings, especially in Africa, where different cultures govern the way we behave or how we speak in a specific community. In a study on court interpreters interpreting for pretrial detainees in South Africa, many respondents emphasized that knowledge of culture is vital to keep an account to interpret accurately for another culture. One participant stated that avoiding eye contact is considered behaving respectfully towards elders in African culture, where it would be considered rude in the Western culture. And the avoiding of eye contact. Another prisoner said that it was important when interpreting for an adult Zulu prisoner to use hlonipha, which is a form of respectful cases. The interpreter has to have intimate knowledge of signs of respect in a different culture. In a study of pretrial prisoners' well-being and experiences of imprisonment in Nigeria, it was found that prisoners commonly use a mixture of English and their local language, Igbo, when sharing their experiences, which constituted a need for interpretation. The results revealed that the prisoners experienced disbelief and denial, but the authors noted that there was a much richer meaning in the prisoners' native language, Igbo, than in English, which was lost due to cultural differences. They refer specifically to prisoners citing biblical anecdotes to illustrate their religious beliefs. In this context, knowledge of the specific culture's religion is important for accurate interpretation. Then, dialectal differences. When interpreting for prisoners, the languages represented might fail to match the actual linguistic needs of the prison population. This statement applies well to the South African prison context, where it was found in the same study on court interpreters interpreting for prisoners in South Africa that thousands of prisoners speak a deep rural Xhosa that does not Xhosa. Similarly, prisoners' use of Afrikaans does not match standardized Afrikaans. It was also pointed out that the mixing of Xhosa and English is very prevalent. Additionally, prisoners have their own language, which makes it important for the interpreter to try and understand and interpret their so-called lingo. In Gauteng, for example, the accused is known to play with the interpreter's mind. On the account of selling unlawful products, they would use code words such as cellulars, hot stuff, and brand talking to the interpreter so the police officer can't understand them. This makes the interpreter's task to get the message across very difficult. In Nigeria, the first type of English that solely served as a contact communication was a Pidgin English. With that came the rise of Nigerian Pidgin English, or NPE, of indigenous languages and English. NPE fundamentally mixes English words with the grammar structures of indigenous languages. There was a need to capture their culture in a new idiom, as seen in this quote. I think that had altered to fit its new African surroundings. Examples of the translation of expressions as recognized in indigenous languages is for "Are you people going?" and "Not on the seat" for "Not currently in the office. In a survey done in 20 Nigerian states, it was evident that 72% of respondents mix their native language with English. What this means for an interpreter is that there is an entirely different dialect of language to attend to when interpreting between English and an indigenous Nigerian language. Power dynamics. Social differences and power relations play a vital role in interpreted encounters. Whether the language is foreign or not, the clients in need of community interpreting services are essentially minority language speakers. The interpreter should attempt to balance power gaps and establish trust between parties, especially in prisoner interpreting exchanges, since unbalanced power relations, mistrust, and high levels of emotional tension are inherent to prisons and courts. Language status and power gaps are thus in question. Naturally involved that made English the common language to be used for official purposes. However, it was determined that the home language distribution among staff was approximately 50% Xhosa, 45% Afrikaans, and 5% due to a high number of prisoners' superficial competence in English. Despite these language barriers, there were no official provisions for professional interpretation.
Luke.
This is part 2 of my presentation. I apologize for that. My video cut off due to an unknown error. Let me just continue where I was. The need for interpreters was commonplace due to prisoners' superficial competence in English, but despite this, there were no official provisions for professional interpreting services. Ad hoc interpreters then had to step in to bridge the language gaps, which were usually prison guards, supervisors, cleaners, and fellow prisoners. It was evident that English was used as a kind of one-upmanship in tense interactions. Feelings of distrust also surfaced with the use of these ad hoc interpreters. Sometimes it feels like they are not telling us. It's not the real meaning of the words. Here, it becomes difficult for the interpreter to establish trust between parties, and the use of English as a powerful major language results in linguistic power imbalances. In a study of over 600 Nigerian prisoners, it was found that more than 40% of them could not communicate effectively in English with prison guards. A large proportion of prisoners' principal language is not English, or they speak such unusual dialects of English that understanding and communication are clouded. Hausa, Yoruba, and Igbo are the three main languages in Nigeria, and each one is widely spoken in their respective regions. The other 400 plus spoken languages throughout Nigeria are labeled minority languages. In Nigeria, English has also become a dominant yet imposed language, expanding and growing at the expense of indigenous languages. Officials have determined that between 30 to 40% of criminal defendants require an interpreter to aid them in fully understanding the proceedings against them. It is stated that the non-English speaking defendant is increasingly causing problems for the administration of criminal justice in Nigeria. In these two African countries, there are unrealistic expectations that all citizens are competent in English, which leads to interpreting services not being provided because it's deemed unnecessary. In this way, prisoners are denied the right to receive and share their experiences in a language that they understand. It's therefore problematic that English assumes this almost unhealthy, powerful position. The next thing is power gaps. The position of every participant in the interaction and the nature of the relationships between them entail implications for the power dynamics. The relationships between prison guards and prisoners are based on issues of power and control, creating power gaps, which leads to tense and antagonistic environments. In the prison setting, prison guards have much more power as primary participants due to their affiliation with the institution. Prison guards exercise power by searching prisoners, censoring letters, searching cells, etc. In South African prisons, it is highlighted that the power of prison guards can become very problematic. And likewise, in Nigerian prisons, it's noted that prison guards often abuse their powerful positions, making prisoners feel powerless and oppressed. Prisons are very dynamic environments where events constantly take place. Tension between prisoners and prison guards, management changes, disagreements, etc. These events can form or sever bonds, creating new alliances and altering the relationship between prison guards and prisoners. If the interpreter is a fellow prisoner, however, the power gap tilts the other way, creating a kind of 2 against 1 situation. This can be attributed to close relationships between prisoners and their mutual agenda against the prison system. They could, for instance, be secretive and gossip behind the prison guard's back because he doesn't understand them. Another regular occurrence due to the interpreter being a fellow inmate, for example, is that the interpreter can simply reply directly to the primary participant's questions due to having prior knowledge about the person they are interpreting for. Therefore, the dynamics of the interaction is largely dependent on whether the interpreter is a fellow prisoner or not. The last section is responsibility and role. The community interpreter is serving two clients and has to distance himself or herself from taking sides. This requirement to act faithfully, independently, and impartially in commitment to confidentiality constitutes the interpreter's professional code of conduct. However, the participants' goals are often conflicting when interpreting for prisoners, which has implications for the role they fulfill. Community interpreters also often challenge certain norms like accuracy, impartiality, and confidentiality, either consciously or subconsciously, though they should attempt to remain relatively impartial. In this case, we're looking at conflicting goals and challenging norms. The ad hoc interpreter could have an underlying agenda to be seen as favorable and cooperative by the prison guard in order to enjoy certain privileges in the prison facility. In a Nigerian prison, it was indeed found that the presence of a prison guard can inhibit prisoners' openness in sharing their experiences and answering questions. On the other hand, a lawyer could be fishing for information or certain behaviorisms instead of factual information to use in a criminal case. Referring to Nigeria, the presence of an interpreter affects the dynamics in such a way that interpreters are frequently co-opted inadvertently or deliberately by lawyers and other parties into furthering their own objectives. The interpreter is tasked with being objective and should not give in to either side, which is ultimately a difficult task when the two sides have polar opposite agendas. Community interpreters are expected to keep information confidential and to avoid bringing up new information as obtained outside the interaction. One source of stress on the part of the community interpreter is endogenous pressure. Endogenous pressure stems from being uncertain on what actions to take. That is when professional role, ethical principles, and personal values collide. An example in the prisoner interpreting exchange would be when a prisoner confides in the interpreter that he wants to commit suicide. In this case, the interpreter has to choose between the ethical duty of confidentiality and assisting the prisoner with their mental health, possibly saving a life. In Nigeria and South Africa, there is a state obligation to protect the prisoner's life from the commission of suicide. Yet, prison staff members in African countries are not trained to help prisoners with mental health problems, nor do they have the necessary facilities to treat them. The interpreter is thus tasked with a difficult decision to make: assist or resist. In conclusion, what sets the bar for community interpreters serving clients behind bars in Nigeria and South Africa? Firstly, the setting. Prisons hold a negative environment for interpreting regarding bad conditions and a lack of privacy, silence, and space due to overcrowding. Secondly, communicative competence. Cultural and dialectal differences should be highly regarded in prisoner interpreting exchanges to avoid distorting or losing meaning. Thirdly, power dynamics. Language status is problematic if one powerful language, English, is placed on a pedestal and the position of every participant in prisoner interpreting exchanges results in power gaps. Lastly, responsibility and role. Participants often have conflicting goals and underlying agendas in the prisoner interpreting exchange. And endogenous pressure places the community interpreter in a difficult position regarding whether to challenge or comply with rules. Prisoner interpreting in Nigeria and South Africa would therefore constitute a very unique challenge and would require a significantly high bar of expectations on the part of the community interpreter to fulfill. Let me just give you a look at my reference list. Bye, Donkey. Thank you very much. I'm open to hear any comments, suggestions, or questions you might have for me.
Thank you, Kanya. Colleagues, as I think whether you've seen or not, Kanya is in the meeting and she has, she's connected. Kanya, can you just let us hear you?
Hello, Kobus, I'm here.
Okay, right. So colleagues, you went a little bit over your time, but there's quite a good time still left for questions. Any questions or suggestions? Please raise your hands or just start talking. Okay, there's a question from Enoch Sibuyungu. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Chair. And I'd also like to thank Kanja Susan for this of prisons, talking about prisoners' rights, linguistic rights, and their right to be heard through linguistic mediation. I have two questions for you. First, in your conclusion, do you see any space for training of community interpreters working in prisons and courts in South Africa or Nigeria? I would like you to shed a little bit more light on the training needs of these community interpreters. And then secondly, you highlight very many challenges in this area. I'm just curious, in your study, were you able to get in touch with prisoners, with prison authorities, and find out what the situation is on the ground? I would love to hear more of real life practical examples from the field. Thank you.
Thank you, Enoch, for your questions. Yes, I definitely agree with you that it would be necessary for prisoner interpreters to be trained. The goal of my study was to highlight specific challenges that the prisoner interpreter would have to face in countries like South Africa and Nigeria. Unfortunately, I did not do any practical inquiries into this. I did not, it was entirely theoretical. So I basically just tried to make some predictions of what I think it would be like. But I would definitely love to eventually maybe do a study where I can actually go and see what it would actually be like and see if the theory holds up in practice.
Thanks, Kanya. I don't see other hands. So if you still have questions, please raise your hands. Kanya, I will keep you busy in the meantime. So my question would be, could you explain to us why you decided to compare South Africa with Nigeria and not, let's say, with Egypt or Tanzania or Kenya or Lesotho or any other African country? Or maybe even countries outside of Africa?
Yeah, okay. So basically, when I wrote this paper, I wrote it about prisoner interpreting in general. So I did not refer to Africa or any specific continent or country. And when I saw this conference and the topic community interpreting in Africa, I decided to look into some African countries and try to apply it to the theory. And then I chose South Africa because I am from South Africa. So I feel like I know a bit more about South Africa. And the reason why I chose Nigeria as the other country is simply because in my search for articles, in my research and reading, there were a lot of articles on prisons in Nigeria, not necessarily about interpreting, but I got an insight into the conditions in the prisons and language use, etc.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions? Let me just check also in the chat box. Okay, so there are no more questions. And then let us just see, anybody want to raise their hand? Right. There is Peter Flynn.
Hello, thank you, Kanji, for that interesting talk. I had a question about the distinction you make between prison interpreting and prisoner interpreting, because the same problem exists in, the distinction between legal interpreting and court interpreting. So I was wondering if you could tell us a little more about that. What made you make that distinction? It's a rather clear one.
Yeah, that came about halfway through my project. I realized that I would actually like to, my project was originally only on prison interpreting because that's what the literature is on. But when I saw all of these interesting studies about pretrial detainees in courts, I thought it would be very interesting to include them because they are essentially prisoners. They are untried or unconvicted prisoners. And I also read that in South Africa and in African countries, court interpreting often fall under community interpreting because the court interpreters are not always trained or very professionally trained, essentially.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I am aware of that. It's yeah. Yeah. Okay, but thank you very much. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. I think we have time for one more question. Paul Bandia, would you ask your question?
Well, actually, it's a comment, and I just want to give this piece of work. I think it's really quite original given the context that is being studied. I just wanted to call your attention to a theoretical aspect of the work that I think it's extremely useful and needs to be developed further, as I say in my comments in the chat, and that I was going to refer you to Michel Foucault's work on power relations, where he works specifically with contexts such as the prison, asylums, and things like that. I think if you were to, read that up, you would see how much information you would be getting out of that would inform your work a lot more, in a lot more substantial way. Just look it up. Foucault's power relation studies in relation to prisons, asylums and all that, it is become the basis for research in power relations with such institutions. So I'm just thinking that you should probably take a look at it. I suppose you're aware of it. I don't know if you ever consulted it, but you definitely draw a lot from it because it's not talking only about power relations between interpreters or workers at institutions, and the prisoners is talking about institutional power itself, how it affects that relationship, the power of society, the power of governments, the power of institutions, how it affects that relationship. And it could be an interesting addition to developing the power relations aspect of it.
Yes, no, thank you. That would definitely be very useful. I also personally think that the power dynamics is the most interesting aspect when I did this study. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks, Kanya. Let me just check that I don't see, that I don't understand. Okay, so we sort of at the end of our time anyway. Kanya, thank you for your presentation, and the first two speakers, thank you for your presentation. That brings an end to the presentations of the day. I will now hand over to Luke Lipsy. He has some socialization up his sleeve. So over to you, Luke.
Okay, thank you very much, Prof. Kobis. Thank you, Kanja, for the wonderful presentation. At this point, what we are going to do is to know ourselves. Would like to know who attended the conference and the things that we are into individually. So I'm going to mention names, looking at what I have on the list of participants. When I mention your name, just turn on your video, tell us what you do, where you are, and you could put your contact details in the chat box. You could also mention your research areas for possible collaboration. The other thing that you can tell us, and that I'll ask you to tell us, is what you have learned so far. Today is the 4th day of our conference. So the first person I have on my list, and I'd like to give Professor Flynn the floor. Professor Flynn, could you turn on your video?
Yes, I can.
So that those who did not see you on the day 1 of the conference,
can you see me?
Can see you.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you.
Okay. Your question was what what I'm interested in at the conference, or just what I'm interested in generally?
Yes, what you are interested in generally.
Yeah. I'm interested in generally speaking, in the relationship between translation and ethnography, which is a very broad area of study. But I'm also interested in sociolinguistics and literary studies and cultural studies. So I have a broad interest, and I've mainly published in translation studies and either on ethnography or some related aspect of it, but also on imagology and translation, which is the study of image construction in literature and what happens to that when it gets translated into other languages. What has interested me about this conference is the amazing variety of papers that tackle the central theme from all sorts of different angles. The quality of the papers has been really, really impressive. And I think the discussion has been very, very lively. And I would like to thank the organizers and ATSA in general for doing a great job so far. I'm very proud to have been asked as a keynote for this conference. And I hope to meet you again, hopefully in person, at the next ATSA conference, wherever that might be. So congratulations to you all for this. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Flynn. And we also appreciate your presence and your presentation on Monday. Thank you very much. Now we'll move to the next person, Professor Paul Bandia. Professor Bandia?
Yes, yes, yes. Okay. I am basically interested in translation studies from the point of view of history and theory. I work a lot in translation history and theory. But as some of you might know, my interest has been so far in the impact or the influence or the presence of post-colonial theory on translation studies since the cultural turn. With the opening of the cultural turn in translation studies, post-colonialism and post-colonial studies have had a great of impact on translation studies. Most of the research that is being done today, even outside post-colonial context, draw from post-colonial theories and to develop the field in many different directions, including cultural studies and all the like. I am currently working a lot more on works that have got to do with the grants that I have, which is on migration and translation, and the whole context of the relations between the global South and the global North, in terms of current context of globalization. My material has always been mostly about literary translations, but I do also draw from sociological issues that have to do with language in society, not just literary, but language in society. Okay, and I have enjoyed the conference so far. In fact, this is probably my fourth conference over this spring summertime here in Canada online. I was a keynote for one in Paris last week, and I must say this one really is fascinating. Turned out to be the most fascinating because of the variety of topics being dealt with, and the the even balance between pragmatic issues and theoretical issues. I like that because sometimes some conferences you can just have people talking above your heads all the time. So that balance has been very, very good. Hands-on approaches, specific issues being dealt with, things that really matter or touch people's lives and affect society. And I think it's been very rich and very, very encouraging to see this happening in Africa. And as current ATSA president, I can only thank you and hope that we continue in this regard, move on and make sure that Africa has its well-deserved place in the field of translation studies across the globe. So that's all I got to say for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Professor Paul Bandia, President of ATSA. Now we move to the HOD for the Department of French, University of Ghana, Dr. Chachu.
Hello. So I'm also really glad to have seen this conference come to fruition after having to be postponed last year due to COVID. I'm really, really glad for the team working together to get it come this far. And so I'm Sewenam Chachu, University of Ghana, Department of French. A linguist and didactician by training, but along the way, I got interested in language use in specific contexts. And so I got into language and migration, which got me into language and public service access. And of course, then it's the issue of translation came up. And so that's really how I got into the translation interpretation fray. Even though, well, when I was a student in Paris, I had the chance to actually serve as a public service interpreter, and it was mainly by telephone. And so I was also exposed to health and other social issues as far as interpreting is community interpreting is concerned. And I also have learned so much and seen perspectives of translation I hadn't even thought of. And I think that's the field of community and interpreting and translation in Africa is still very fertile. And there's a lot that we can discover, especially as we collaborate and work together. So thank you for being here, and I'm really glad to meet you all. I hope that we can take the conversation beyond this conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chachu. Definitely, we are going to take the conversation beyond this conference. Let me move to Abdul Karim. Abdul Karim. Abdul Karim Mandani. Okay, Abdul Karim Mandani is not responding, so I'll go to Amos Yilkur. I hope that's the pronunciation. Amos. Yes, Amos, we can see you, but we cannot hear you. It appears Amos is having technical issues. So let me move to Beatrice Manigat.
Yes, hello, Luke. Hi,
Yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, and I'm sure others can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, I'm joining from a tablet. Thank you very, very much, first of all, for University of Ghana for hosting this very, very interesting event, and to ATSA as well for organizing. I learned a lot. I, for my part, I'm a conference interpreter, so trained at the University of Ghana as a conference interpreter. And I am also learning, I'm an interpreter trainer, a graduate assistant in the interpreting program. I am originally from Haiti and very much interested in language as access to language as a human right. Our country is a bilingual country, with Haitian, Creole, and French being on a par. And I am interested in, indeed, the access to a language interpretation in public service settings. So that is what my research is mainly about. And I have been really fascinated by some of the presentations on hands-on, indeed, experiences, whether in Ghana, whether in Nigeria, and South Africa. I mean, I have learned a lot, not only in the practical realm, but also theory, and this will help me a lot to further my own research. And I hope that I will be able next year or in 2 years to share with you. So thank you very much, and congratulations to all of you, to all the speakers, fascinating presentations, and to the organizing team. Chapeau. Merci.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Beatrice Manigat. I'll move to Abubakari Samir Olubumni. I hope that is the pronunciation. Abubakari. Great. We can see you, but we cannot hear you. Your voice is faint.
Actually, with microphone. Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, we can hear you, just a bit faint.
So sorry about it. Thank you very much. This is very interesting. First, I have to commend the organizers of this program. I really learned a lot. I'm Samia Abubakari Olubumi. I'm a fresh graduate of translation from the University of Ilorin, Nigeria. I specialize in literary translation. That is the area of my thesis, the last that I wrote, and I've been actually writing on translation. I've worked with media houses translating news.
Okay.
Center.
Okay.
At present, also working within the University of Ilorin as a lecturer. I teach linguistics. I applied languages. I speak some languages like Hausa, and Yoruba, which is my native language. So I actually like to be more trained because I'm just stepping into the family. Well, I've really learned a lot from all the presentations so far, and I really appreciate that I'm part of this event. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Samir. Let's move to Ebenezer. Ebenezer Ted-Young. Okay, it appears Ebenezer Ted-Young is not close to his mic. So we'll go to the next person, Chimeni Kengi. Chimeni Kengi, please forgive me if I'm not pronouncing the names the way I should pronounce them. Sorry, Chimeni Kengi is not also responding. So Enoch Sibuyungo, could you turn on your video and let us see you? Good, we can see you. Now we need to hear your voice.
Thank you very much, moderator. Had I known that I was going to appear on video, I would have put on my beautiful suit and tie. I wasn't really prepared for this. Nonetheless,
you look great.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. My name is Enoch Sebuyungo. I teach French and translation studies at Makerere University here in Uganda. This is my very first meeting, very first time to attend an ATSA conference, and it has been absolutely phenomenal. It has really been great meeting with colleagues across the continent and outside Africa, discussing translation issues and interpreting in Africa and beyond. I'm very passionate about the interaction between African indigenous languages and English and French. I'm very interested in translator and interpreter training and translation and interpretation quality. And I think I've gained a lot from this conference, and I'm really looking forward to further collaboration with colleagues, and most especially becoming a member of ATSA. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Enoch. So the next person is Dr. Elias Kaiser. Elias Kaiser, could you turn on your video?
Oh, okay.
Yes. Yes, we can
good
see
evening.
you.
Yeah, I am Elias Kaiser, linguist and didactician. I'm into linguist and linguistic and didactics, University of Ghana. But I am interested in translation. That's why whenever there is a translation program, I always attend the program because I have interest in it. And I'm so happy to, all the presentation, the beautiful presentation, interesting presentations. I have learned a lot because there are certain things that we overlook, but they are very much appreciative in translation. We have learned a lot these 2-3 days, and I'm very much thankful to all the organizers and all the presenters in the various on the various teams. We are so thank you all, and I know that this will not be the last one. The subsequent one will also be motivated to participate and to present a paper as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Kaiser. This definitely is not going to be the last. We will have more such events. The next person is Frederick Chiwanga. Frederick? Frederick Chiwanga? Okay, I guess Frederick Chiwanga cannot hear me. So I'll move to the next. Jackie Anastasi. Jackie, if you can hear me, just turn on your video, tell us what you are into and what you've learned so far.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, Jackie Anastasi is my name. I want first of all to say thank you for the University of Ghana to have organized this, and as well as ATSA. I am an MA student at UNISA doing my dissertation at the moment. I am actually a translator and interpreter. Interested in translation studies, especially, and my focus is on metaphor. And because I believe that we all speak metaphorically every day, and this is a linguistic phenomenon that we have to deal with, in both in interpretation and in translation. So I am interested, like I said, in metaphors in translation studies. What I learned in this conference is actually the emphasis we put, the different presenters put on community interpreting and translation, which most of the time we neglect and prioritize conference interpreting in, conference interpreting. So I think highlighting community interpreting during this conference from different angles was a very good thing to do. And I thank the organizer and the different presenters who have really helped us to understand the importance of looking around us. And yeah, this is what I can say. And I was here to learn as well from the different presenters. And my first time being an African platform, international platform, I've learned a lot. And I hope this is not the first time. And like somebody said earlier on, I'll end up being a member of ASTA. Thank you very much.
Great, great. We encourage you to fill your membership form as soon as possible. So the next person is Zani. Zani, in case you can hear me, could you turn on your video and tell us more about yourself? Great. We cannot hear you. You need to unmute.
I just wanted to, you are referring to me, sorry. Zaini.
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. I never know if there's more than one of me. Hi, I'm Zaini Ansamaviran. I am a lecturer in interpreting at the University of the Free State. I do my research in community interpreting, specifically non-professional interpreting, and more specifically, the semiotic side of it. And I'm interested in the human and the non-human in a post-human, post-humanist society, and in general, our role as humans and non-humans in the Anthropocene, I think. And what I learned from this conference was just the wide variety of knowledge we have to share on this continent, and that we don't have to go outside of this continent to get knowledge. We have so much to share from within and amongst one another. And I'm looking forward to the next conference. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zani. And I need to add that if you would like to know and understand the language of animals, you would need to talk to Zani. Let me go and ask Nanama Asante to also introduce herself. Nanama Asante, could you turn on your video and tell us more about yourself?
Good afternoon. Unfortunately, I cannot turn on my video now. I work I'm doing national service with the University of Ghana, so I have the opportunity to assist at the French department, and I work directly with Dr. Sawenam Chachu. I'm recently learning about translation and interpretation. So when I heard about the conference, I thought it's a good opportunity to also come and learn. And I'm glad that I've been here from the beginning, and I'm learning a lot. I can't say which is my favorite presentation so far because I've enjoyed each of them equally.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nanama. Next is Kokuda Boko. I hope that is the pronunciation. Kokuda. Okay, I think he cannot hear me. So I'll go to Jemanen Juse. Sorry, I'm unable to pronounce some of the names the way I should pronounce them, but I'm sure you can. Okay. Great. Kindly tell us more about yourself. And I encourage you to put your details in the chat box. You can use the chat tool to put your details.
Hello.
For
good afternoon, everybody.
Collaboration.
Okay, good afternoon. All right. That's okay. I will do that.
Great. So just tell us more about yourself.
My name is Gemanen Gyuse. Originally, I am from Nigeria, but currently I'm in. Okay, I am from Nigeria. Originally, I'm a lecturer with the Benue University in Makurdi, by my PhD program, and by the grace of God, I'm about to round off my PhD program. I actually was interested in this conference, but unfortunately, I had already submitted the paper I was supposed to come and present in this conference to the University of, in Spain, Barcelona, Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona. So my paper was already accepted there for presentation, so there was no need of coming to present it here. And that was why I didn't present here. I am currently a student, so I work with Isabelle Robert, very wonderful professors, Isabelle Robert and Jim Uri, are very renowned and world-class professors. I'm interested in translation product and process. I'm also interested in second language acquisition, and I am interested in translation evaluation. Currently, I am a good student of Daniel Gil.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Great. So we'll move to the next person, Yolande Ilbudu. Yolande, I guess I'm pronouncing the name well. Okay, Yolande. Some people are also using the chat to introduce themselves. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So you can visit the chat to know more about all the participants who are here. So let me do the next person, Jennifer Talua. Jennifer Talua. Okay, I can see Yolande. Yolande, I think you are ready to introduce yourself.
Yes.
Please go
Hi,
ahead.
everybody. I wrote in the chat. I'm unable to speak at workplace currently.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great
Jennifer, Miss Jennifer Talua.
Yes, good afternoon. Please, Talua Jennifer. Yes, I just completed my master's program in translation at the University of Ghana. And I must confess that indeed I've learned so much from from the various presentations and from experienced translators and interpreters. So I hope to, I pray that, or I hope that we'll have a more, meetings or sessions like this so that I can learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Let me go to James Agbo. James Agbo, kindly turn on your video and introduce yourself. James Agbo. James Agbo. Okay, it appears James Agbo cannot hear me. I think I have mentioned all the names that I can see on the list, but in case I probably failed to see your name.
Maybe accept mine. Did you mention mine, please?
I did. I did. Sorry,
maybe I was
think you can
distracted.
introduce yourself now.
Okay, good. I am Dr. Ebenezer Tedwong from Cameroon. And in fact, I like the name doctor because I am getting to 50 soon and I just had my doctorate. So maybe that's why I want to become Prof. If Prof. Mare is here, he may understand what I want to say.
Okay.
So I have worked both as a translator and then conference interpreter for close to, anyway, more than 15 years. I started working as a high school teacher. So I taught languages, French as a foreign language, English as a foreign language as well, French as a second language. And then after a number of years of training, I got into customers, sometime like the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank. And but I realized most professional interpreters don't believe in research. So there's this kind of divide. You have academics on one side and then professionals on the other side. But maybe because of my background, I always thought for me to be professionally successful, there need chat through this afternoon shows that all over Africa, we have the same kind of concerns with the management of our multilingual context. And of course, we need to interact with each other in order to be able to, not only to compare, but to make sure that we learn from each other. And what worked in Ghana, we should be able to know how it can work in Cameroon and vice versa. So
Thank you.
I look at this conference mostly as an opportunity to really interact with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ebenezer. Now I think I failed to mention in Danache Nyasingbe's name. So in Danache Nyasingbe, could you turn on your video and introduce yourself?
Yes. I hope everybody, really sorry for my voice. I am Danache Nyasingbe, as you just pronounced it very well. I'm a Togolese. I'm a language teacher. I'm teaching English and French in secondary schools in Togo. I got a master's degree in Anglophone literature. And I'm also a translator and interpreter at Helping Hands International. Yeah, though I did not get a systematic training in translation and interpretation, I usually take part in workshops and practical trainings to support myself in what I'm doing as a translator and interpreter. And also, I'm also looking forward to start an academic training very soon in translation and interpretation because I'm really interested in those fields. And I confess that I have learned a lot during that conference. And I just have to thank the presenters and the organizing board for all that you have shared with us. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Nyasingbe. Now I'll call our host, Mr. Samuel Boabeng. Boabeng, could you turn on your video? We saw you yesterday, but yes, we can see you.
Hello, everybody. Thank you, Luke. I almost thought you forgot about me.
No.
Yeah, but thank you. My name is Samuel Boabeng, and I'm also in the French department of the University of Ghana. I'm a young researcher, and I believe out of this conference, there's been a lot of eye-opening into very, very diverse, many areas of research that we can look into. And I'm really, really grateful, and I really want to thank the department and ATSA for the opportunity to have not just partaken in this conference, but to have actually, in a way or the other, being a part of getting all these brought up. So that's me. Thank you very much.
Yes, that is Samuel Boabeng. Thank you very much, Samuel Boabeng. Pamela. Miss Pamela Amwa, we saw her probably an hour ago or 30 minutes ago, maybe an hour ago. Yeah, Pamela, we can see you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Lipsy. My name is Pamela Amwa. I'm a conference interpreter and translator by profession, as well as a lecturer with the Department of French at the University of Ghana. I teach in the Masters in Conference Interpreting program, as well as in the undergraduate level. And so I'm sure you would understand that my areas of my interest in research would be directed towards translation and interpretation studies. I am happy to be a part of this conference, and I believe it has been successful thus far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pamela. Thank you so much. I am now trying to introduce myself. So I am Luke. I'm Luke Liabzie. I teach translation. In fact, I'm interested in translation technologies. Anything maths, CATS, MT, I'm interested. So I'm with the Department of French, and I've learned a lot from this conference. In fact, the thing that really struck me was the language of animals, and understanding that language and doing the interpretation and translation for animals. It's interesting. And we thank all of you who have really sacrificed to be part of this event from day one. Today is the 4th day, and we are going to end this tomorrow, but it is not going to end there. The conversation will continue. So thank you very much. I think at this point, in case I not mentioned your name, you can just let me know, or else we will have our announcements, and tomorrow we'll come back and close everything. But let me also add that you can, in case the name you provided, that's when you were filling the form, is not the way you always write your name or the way you want to have it written on a certificate. Kindly send me your full name at your title if you need to add it, because we are going to present the certificates tomorrow. Thank you very much. Now we will give you the program for tomorrow. HOD, I don't know if you have anything to say at this point. Dr. Chachu?
No, please, just look forward to seeing everybody tomorrow, and let's have a restful afternoon. We look forward to the last set of presentations, and hopefully our provost will join us for the closing ceremony. So let's continue the conversations after here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chachu. So for tomorrow, this is what we have. We'll have 3 presentations. We'll have our presentation of certificates, and we'll have other activities tomorrow. So we encourage you to be here tomorrow, same time, 12:30 GMT, and let's end this together. Thank you very much. You can still send all your questions to ATSA gh@yahoo.com, and we will be ready and willing to answer all those questions that we can answer. Thank you very much, and stay safe. We'll see you tomorrow.